Hey everyone, Christian here, and I wanted to do a little vlog on how certain species of palms can look very different depending on the climate and the way that they're cultivated. So here we have a huge, or I should say a very tall, many specimens actually of tall Dypsis lutescens, the Areca palm, and you can see here they're growing, like this is a clump of just two of them, and they're kind of grown in doubles, or this one's actually solitary, there's a couple of them actually. And they have probably been here since the early 90s, and they've survived every freeze, and they actually look pretty cool. They look a little bit dainty compared to some of the other ones you might see growing in hedges that are fully fertilized. These are irrigated, but I don't think that they're fertilized. But you can see that they look quite different. They have this kind of almost coconut lean to them, and they're growing out towards the sun, I imagine. Although this is a south-facing wall, so I'm not probably just growing out to get away from the building. So you can see here that these have not been trimmed at all. They have just been growing like two, or even there's just one with no little guys coming up. But over here, if you look right there, there's a bunch of little offshoots coming up, and they look like they get trimmed down pretty often. And so these have just seeded, and usually they seed midsummer, and there's seed all over the ground here, and it's littered. I don't know if they're any good anymore, and it's getting late, so I'm not gonna pick them up because I can usually get them in larger quantities when they're ready to harvest. So, but it's kind of interesting to see just how they almost, if you could just take away the pinnate, the look of the Areca head and put on a coconut, they almost look like swaying coconuts in the wind, and they look pretty cool when they're nice and tall. Now, we're in Fort Myers by the river, so it's going to be more of like a 10B climate, and in 9B climates you're never going to see them get quite this tall. So this is kind of a sign of like a tropical climate, so to speak, because of the way that these are growing. They usually top out around 10 or 12 feet in colder climates, but here, because they're on the south side of the wall of this building here, the Edison Mall, they are able to kind of just get protected from the coldest of freezes, probably in the 90s and 2000s, and even in 2010, 2011, and they look pretty cool. Even though some, this one doesn't look so great, and that one over there, this one right there doesn't look too hot, but they are still flowering and producing seed, and they just have a real neat look to them. They have the step trunks and things you just don't normally see on lutescens, because you normally don't see them this tall. And this is actually a common look if you see them in the tropics, but in most parts of Florida you actually will never see them grow to this height. They do have the nickname the golden butterfly palm, and you can kind of see the yellowish gold color. Some of it's actually from nutrient deficiency, but the yellow coloring on the crown shaft is kind of in that golden color, even though it's when the leaf when the frond is ready to drop. That's kind of where the name comes from. So you can see that they have a tristaceous growth pattern, meaning they grow in three directions, 1, 2, 3. And it's hard to see on Arecas that don't have trunk, but it does exist. And when they're solitary, it's much easier to see that. So I imagine they probably pull up or spray for weeds, or I'm sorry, not for weeds, but for volunteers. And so that's why we don't see any other ones growing up. Either that, or they just don't get irrigated enough to grow. But these do tend to pop up pretty easily, so there's probably a few hanging around. You can even see they kind of have aerial roots quite a little bit there, and more so there. So it's interesting to see these kind of exposed. We often see them where the petioles and trunks can't be seen much of at all. It's mostly just a foliage plant, where here mostly what you can see is just the trunks. So you can see they're kind of comparing in height to some of the smaller royals here. In fact, they're probably the same size, same height as these royals right here. So we'll go over here and just take a quick look at the ones that are kind of clumping a little bit. You can see here, looks like they've tried to trim off some of the other trunks here. These are probably grown as like someone threw like a bunch of seeds into the pot and just grew many plants that all clumped. So it's like a multiple clumping plant all in one. And what it does is it makes it so that there's so many little plants that really can't take off and do well. But again, there's some that are looking dainty, but for the most part, there's some pretty robust ones too. This one here, and that was probably the tallest one of them all. It's a solid 20-something feet, and you know, they look pretty cool. They look a little bit. It would be a little bit nicer if it were in the sun. I could show everyone what they kind of look like. They kind of have the sun shining on them. They have more of a golden color, but you know, it's nighttime. The lights are here, but still looks pretty cool in my opinion, especially looking upward at them. So I think that this is kind of a different view on how we see lutescens as a clumping hedging palm versus an open air kind of you know, allowed to grow to their maximum height. They have a whole different look to them. So anyway, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the vlog. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe, and you'll see many more palm reviews, and hit the bell notification. I do go live quite a bit. And if you have any questions about growing lutescens, whether this way or in the hedging fashion, leave them down below, and I'll get to everyone as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.